property right to the government. You might still be able to use it under their blessing for a while, but a generation from now, that blessing will be gone, and those lands will be controlled fully by the government. Remember, Agenda 21 is the plan for the 21st century to remake human societies in this collectivist image. Regulation is another major tool. In Santa Cruz, sits on a bay that runs from Monterey to Santa Cruz County. It's 26 miles as the crow would fly across the ocean from one point to the other. But we have a national marine bay sanctuary that covers, people in our community don't know this, but it covers 5,000 square miles. 400 miles of the California coast are under the ambit of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. Fishermen are feeling that pain already, but what's not understood is that half of that coverage is landmass. From the ridgetop to the shoreline is also covered under regulations and 25 governmental enforcement agencies to make sure it happens, to control all activity so that we can keep our sanctuary. Anyone know what the word sanctuary means? We're describing an ocean as a sanctuary? Pure. So the tools of regulation are coming from all kinds of angles. Our mountains in Santa Cruz have 4 or 5 regulatory crossroads that, from water quality control boards to the forestry board to the Monterey Bay Sanctuary and to a habitat conservation plan that will continue to try to make its way into our county, one after the other after the other. It's like having 5 ropes tying you from every angle. The goal is to create battered willing sellers. The term the government uses is, well, they're willing sellers. They sold it to us. Well, it's kind of like the kid in the playground who comes and puts your arm behind your back and starts to crank it up, up, up until you say uncle. Well, that's what the willing sellers selling to the government have become. But the worst of all of this is the Endangered Species Act, because that puts our worst fears into place, because bugs, plants, and animals are deemed more important than human beings. Again, what we must do is come to understand the Constitution. We need to repeal the Endangered Species Act. When government controls the natural resources in the land of America, it will control all of our action, because private property will become eliminated. So for those neighbors, friends, and family members of yours that have been lured by the idea of smart growth, ask them to check their premise. Is sprawl so bad? Is it really so horrible that our children have the choice about where they live and how they live, engaging in free trade amongst people who respect the property and the life of others? Is the development of water sources in the West such a horrible idea? We're breaking our dams in order to create a water shortage so that we tell our farmers that they can't irrigate their crops and they need to turn their land over to better land managers who know how to operate in this new world called sustainable development. And instead of spending hundreds of millions and nationally billions on rapid transit ideas that none of us want, is it really so bad that we use our gas taxes to build more lanes on freeways? Americans are financing double-deck freeways in Mexico City while we build these empty train lines that are designed to cart us around after a collapse. Well, I'd like to introduce you to who I think is the father of American sustainable development, a local citizen here in Maine, George Bush. Mr. Bush said in 1992, while still serving as president, that it is the sacred principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter to which the American people will henceforth pledge their allegiance. Now, what we need to remember is that these ideas behind the United Nations and the ideas behind the United States are antithetical to each other. One realizes that our rights as human beings are inherent, and the other seeks to make our rights the subject and object of elitist grant. So who's implementing Agenda 21, Sustainable Development in the United States? Well, all federal agencies. We've talked about that. Our tax dollars are being used in order to steal our freedom. But also so-called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Now, there are 2,000 non-governmental organizations in the United States that have been accredited by the United Nations for purposes of implementing sustainable development. It includes the Nature Conservancy. It was so refreshing earlier this year to see the Washington Post expose the fraudulent financing vehicle for the theft of American landscapes from Americans that is the Nature Conservancy. The Sierra Club, whose primary mission is the collectivization of water in the West. You can go to any water board and I'll tell you the focus for the Sierra Club has been to get their people on water boards, and it's that way throughout Santa Cruz County. The Audubon Society, the American Planning Association, and the National Teachers Associations are all NGOs. But the third leg of this triage are the foundations. Now, the top 25 foundations in America, private foundations, tax-exempt foundations, are much larger than the top 25 multinational corporations. They seem to be regionalizing America with different foundations having dominion over certain areas. In Southern California, it's the Irvine Foundation. Where I live, the Central Coast of California, it's the Packard Foundation. We need to be wary of Rockefeller, Pew, Turner, Ford, Carnegie, MacArthur, community foundations, and others. The fourth and fifth estates of Agenda 21 that give support are some, not all, but some multinational corporations. Some are just opportunistic, and others are seeking to have a big seat at a shrinking table. And then the mainstream and consolidated media, which does not give attention to these issues. So what can you do? Well, for sure, stop contributing to green organizations, to those non-governmental organizations that are seeking the theft of private property. Because remember that these aren't really NGOs, non-governmental organizations. The words are always falsely put to us. They're really global governance organizations. They've taken their allegiance to the United Nations and to the Sustainable Development cause. Start reading, get your information about what sustainable development is, and you can begin by looking at freedom21santacruz.net. There will give you resources all over the country of the emerging movement to wake the American folks up. So the words we need to be wary of are Agenda 21, United Nations, Sustainable Development, Smart Growth and Wildlands Project. But new meanings have been given to three key words in the Sustainable Development movement. Those words are environment, economy, and equity. These are the words that are preparing for the fall of American values. So what do they mean under this new sustainable development paradigm, as it's called? Well, equity is intended to use the law to re-engineer society and humanity itself. We see that with the environmental movement as it's intending and attempting to create guilt amongst our young people for even being alive. In our schools, death has become a key focus from time to time in our school curriculum. The economy is designed to redistribute America's wealth internationally. That's why our natural resource industries are under such pressure. In California, 80% of our wood is imported while our forests burn. And it is the replacement of free enterprise with government-private partnerships. Now, I don't know how they can get away with saying that. I mean, anybody who read anything in history knows that that's exactly what Benito Mussolini did. He created government-private partnerships, a system of economy that was followed by Adolf Hitler. When you eliminate the checks and balances that are naturally to exist between government and business, you create tyranny. By definition, it is necessary to separate, not combine, government and business. And the environment is the overlying issue here. But for them,